I remember the exact moment the night began to fall apart. I was standing in the center of the operations room on the 27th floor of the Coal Systems building, surrounded by screens filled with warning codes from a security breach we had been fighting for hours. My shirt was damp from the humidity of too many bodies in one room, and the air felt heavy with pressure. Outside the glass walls, the Seattle storm had fully arrived. Sheets of rain slammed against the building, and thunder rolled over the skyline like a warning I should have listened to. I had just signed the final approval to shut down part of our system when my phone vibrated on the table. It was the notification from Harper's monitor. Fever alert. Elevated breathing. The color drained from my face so quickly that my lead engineer asked if I was all right. I did not answer. I hit the live feed and saw Harper curled on her little bed, her cheeks too red, her tiny chest rising too fast. I felt something cold squeeze my lungs. I told my team to continue without me, and I bolted for the elevator, already calling the babysitter. She answered with wind pounding her phone. She was stuck on the interstate, a major crash. Traffic locked in both directions. No estimate. No chance of reaching my daughter anytime soon. My pulse hammered as I stepped into the elevator and stabbed the lobby button again and again. I opened my contacts and scrolled to the emergency babysitter list I had not used in months. My finger slipped slightly from sweat or panic, and I tapped the wrong number, a number nearly identical to the one I meant to call. I did not know it yet. I simply pressed call and spoke fast the moment a woman's voice answered. I said I needed an emergency sitter at Ashton Tower. Sick child. Immediate arrival. I hung up before she could ask questions. The elevator doors opened and the storm greeted me with a roar. I sprinted across the pavement, rain hitting like needles. My car fishtailed slightly as I pulled onto the road. Wipers fought uselessly against the flood of water. All I could hear in my head was Harper crying on the monitor earlier that evening. She had told me she missed her mother, and I had changed the subject because I did not know how to face that grief anymore. The phone buzzed with an automated confirmation. The message had been sent. My mind was barely holding together as I drove through rivers forming on the uneven streets. When I finally reached the building, I parked half crooked and ran through the lobby with my shoes leaving muddy prints behind me. The elevator ride to my penthouse felt like the slow rise on a roller coaster, the kind where you know the drop will come and there is nothing you can do to stop it. Harper was crying again through the monitor on my phone. Daddy, hurry. Please hurry. I reached the door, shoved the key into the lock, and rushed to her room. She was burning up, breathing fast, trying to sit up, but too weak to do it. I gathered her in my arms and whispered that I was here, even though I could barely breathe from fear. Then the doorbell rang. I froze for a second, Harper still trembling against my chest, and hurried to answer it. When I pulled the door open, I expected to see the backup sitter from the agency. Instead, I found a woman I had never seen before. She was drenched from the storm hair pulled back in a loose knot that was half undone from the wind, a faded canvas backpack slung over one shoulder. Rainwater dripped from her sleeves onto the hallway floor, but her eyes were steady-focused and strangely calm. She asked if I was the one who sent the emergency message. I demanded her identification immediately because no parent in the United States would allow a stranger into their home without proof. She handed me her driver license and held up her phone. My message glowed on her screen, word for word. My chest tightened. Harper coughed behind me, a sharp, painful sound. I stepped aside and told the woman her name was what again? She said Olivia Reed as she walked in with confidence that surprised me. Her eyes moved quickly over Harper, taking in details like she had done this 1,000 times. She washed her hands, knelt beside my daughter, and checked her temperature with the ease of someone who understood children far better than any sitter I had hired. When Harper leaned her small body into Olivia as if she had known her forever, I felt something in my chest crack open. The storm outside kept pounding against the windows, but inside the room the air shifted. Olivia placed a steady hand on Harper's back, whispering something soft that I could not hear, and my daughter's breathing slowed. The tension in her little shoulders eased. And as I watched this stranger calm the child I loved more than anything, I realized that my mistake, the wrong number, the panicked call might be the reason my daughter was safe tonight. I had no idea yet just how much that mistake would change our lives. Olivia moved through my living room with a calm precision that felt out of place in the chaos of that stormy night, yet somehow she belonged there more than I did. I stood a few steps away, trying to steady my own breathing as she settled Harper against her chest. My daughter clung to the fabric of Olivia's damp sweater with the kind of instinct children have when they feel safe, an instinct I had not seen in her since the months before my wife passed. Olivia whispered to her in a soft voice, barely above the sound of the rain beating against the windows, and Harper's trembling began to ease. I felt a tightness in my throat I had not expected. For the last 3 years, every sitter I hired had needed detailed instructions, emergency notes, backup plans, contact lists, clear steps, repeated explanations. Yet this stranger walked in soaked from the storm, learning Harper's name only minutes earlier, and somehow read her better than anyone who came before. Watching her felt like watching someone gently play a piano they had memorized long ago. I lowered myself onto the rug beside them, still not entirely sure if letting her stay was the right choice. I could not understand how she knew exactly how to position Harper, how to slow her breathing, how to time her words with each inhale. I tried to ask how she had learned to care for children this way, but the question caught in my chest. Olivia pressed the back of her hand to Harper's forehead, then leaned closer to inspect the rise of her breaths. She asked if I had fever medicine. I stood up too fast and nearly tripped over a toy left under the coffee table. It was a small wooden rabbit my wife had bought on a trip before Harper was born. I pushed it aside gently, silently, and hurried to the bathroom cabinet. When I returned, Olivia nodded toward the kitchen. She said Harper should have a little warm water first to help her swallow the dose. I filled a small cup hands, shaking slightly, and handed it over. Olivia held Harper upright and guided the cup to her lips. My daughter trusted her completely. She drank without protest, blinking slowly, drifting in and out of alertness. If Harper had been wide awake, she would have pulled away from any stranger. Instead, she leaned into Olivia like she belonged there, like she had been waiting for someone with hands that steady and a voice that gentle. The realization sent a strange ache through me. I watched them for several minutes, unsure what to do with the mix of gratitude, confusion, and something close to jealousy that churned inside my chest. Olivia looked up and asked for a blanket. I moved quickly, relieved to be given a task. I brought the soft blue one my wife used to drape over Harper during movie nights. Olivia wrapped it around Harper, tightened the edges under her arms, then rested the child's head against her shoulder. I had seen pediatric nurses do this in hospitals. Olivia did it the same way without hesitation. I finally asked how she knew all of this. Olivia looked at me for a long moment before answering. She said she used to work at a public school as part of a child support team and often assisted children who experienced anxiety or sensory stress. She said it simply without any attempt to impress me. I asked why she left that job. Her eyes flicked downward in a way that made me think she was choosing which truth to give me. She told me she would explain when Harper was asleep. Her voice held a weight that made clear it was not a story meant for a moment like this. I respected that. Harper let out a soft whimper, and Olivia shifted her back and forth, gently creating a rhythm that reminded me of the nights I used to pace our bedroom with her as a newborn. My memories collided with the present, and for a brief second, I felt swallowed by something I had tried for years to avoid. I swallowed hard and forced myself to stay present. Eventually, Harper's breathing settled into an even flow. Her small hand, relaxed fingers uncurling from Olivia's sweater. Olivia nodded toward the couch. She said Harper could sleep there where she was easier to monitor. I lifted the pillows and arranged them the way I knew Harper preferred. When I reached to take my daughter into my arms, she stirred and clung tighter to Olivia. The rejection hit with a surprising force. It was not rational, but it cut through me anyway. Olivia glanced at me as if she understood without needing it explained. She lowered herself carefully, placing Harper on the couch with practiced ease. Then she stepped back and watched as Harper rolled slightly onto her side, using the blanket as a cushion. I sat on the edge of the coffee table, elbows on my knees, hands covering my mouth. I exhaled slowly. The room was finally quiet, except for the hum of the storm outside and the soft breaths of my child. Olivia asked if I wanted her to leave. The question caught me off guard. I knew she was a stranger. I knew letting someone stay in the home of a single father was something people might judge, but the idea of her leaving made my stomach twist. Harper would wake again. She always did when her fever ran high, and I had seen how her body eased the moment Olivia touched her. I told her I wanted her to stay through the night if she could. Her expression softened. She removed her wet shoes, placed them by the door, and stood quietly at Harper's side while I dimmed the lights. The sense of gratitude rising inside me was almost overwhelming. I leaned back and watched them both, feeling a strange calm press against the chaos of the night. The storm outside was still fierce, but somehow the living room felt warmer, safer. As I studied Olivia in the muted glow of the lamp, I knew one truth with absolute clarity. This woman was not just someone who answered the wrong call. She was someone who held my daughter like she already knew her, and that was something I could not ignore. When Harper finally slipped into a deeper sleep, her breaths steady and soft beneath the blanket, the storm outside eased into a distant rumble that echoed across the city. The quiet in the room felt almost fragile, like any sudden sound might break the thin layer of peace that had settled over us. Olivia stood beside the couch, arms folded lightly, still watching Harper the way a trained professional might monitor a patient. I watched her for several seconds before I finally said what had been stuck in my throat since the moment she arrived. "You were not the sitter I called." She looked at me, the dim lamp behind her casting a soft halo over her damp hair. "No." Her answer was calm, simple, without apology. I exhaled and rubbed my forehead. "Then, how did you get here so fast?" Olivia's lips curved slightly, not quite a smile, more like someone acknowledging a truth they had expected. She held up her phone and turned the screen toward me. "Your message looked exactly like one I received 2 years ago from a family I used to help. The number matched except for one digit. When it popped up tonight, I thought they needed me again." Rain streaked the windows behind her, and I felt a strange chill run through me. A mistake, a wrong call, and yet she had come running through a storm for a child she did not know. "You showed up without confirming the address, without verifying who was calling." She shrugged lightly, but her eyes held something deeper. "You said emergency. Sick child. That was all I needed." I stood silent for a moment, trying to reconcile her words with the constant caution I had built into my life since losing my wife. People did not rush into the unknown anymore. Not in this country. Not in this era. I sat down on the arm of the sofa, looking at Harper's flushed cheeks relaxing into the pillow. I said, "You used to work with a family. What exactly did you do for them?" Olivia took a slow breath and walked toward the small round table near the balcony doors. She rested her hands on the back of a chair as if steadying herself. "I was hired as a child therapist through a school program. The boy I worked with had severe separation anxiety and communication delays. I helped him regulate his breathing, taught him small ways to communicate his needs, and worked with his parents on how to manage his routines." "That was the family you thought this message was from?" She nodded. "They moved out of state a year ago. I do not get messages from them anymore." But this number was one digit away from theirs, and the storm tonight made everything feel like it was happening all over again. I watched her eyes drift for a moment, as if she was standing in a different memory. "Then why did you leave that job?" She stayed quiet long enough that I almost took the question back. When she looked at me again, her face softened, but her expression tightened. "There was an accident. Not my fault, but it happened on a day I was with him. A car jumped the curb near the school. It was fast, loud, traumatic. He was not seriously injured, but the fear in his eyes, I still see it." She swallowed once. "I did everything I could. Everyone said I saved him, but I could not shake the feeling that I had failed him somehow." Her voice carried a tremor that she tried to hide. "I left the school a month later, could not walk into the building without feeling like I was failing every child inside it." A long stretch of silence sat between us. I leaned back slightly, letting her words settle. They explained her instinct, her calm, the way she handled Harper as if she understood more than what was in front of her. They also explained the flicker of sadness I had seen in her when she talked about her past. It was grief. A different kind of grief than mine, but grief all the same. "You did not hesitate to come here tonight," I said quietly. "Even after all that." She let out a soft laugh, tired and thin. Fear does not always stop you from doing something. Sometimes it pushes you toward it. She looked down at her hands and brushed a thumb across her palm. Or maybe I just needed to feel useful again. I watched her study Harper with an attentiveness that was both professional and deeply human. The way she breathed slower when Harper's breathing steadied. The way she leaned in just enough to check her temperature again without disturbing her rest. She was more than a sitter. More than a stranger who happened to show up at my door. And yet she had not been meant to be there at all. "You understand she should not have been the one I called," I said. Olivia nodded. "Yes, but I also understand you were a father trying to make sure your child was safe. And I understand what it feels like to get a call that says someone needs help now." She met my eyes and held them without tension. Sometimes life does not wait for us to sort out the details. We just move. Do the thing that feels right in the moment, even if the moment is messy. The honesty in her tone pressed against something I had kept locked up for 3 years. Something I did not want to name. My wife had been the one who always knew how to comfort Harper. I had been the problem solver, the decisive one, the fixer. After she died, I tried to become both roles, but grief had a way of blinding me, of making me more reactive than thoughtful. Watching Olivia tonight made me feel exposed in ways I had not expected. She crouched down again beside the couch and adjusted the blanket so Harper's feet stayed warm. Harper stirred, but did not wake. Olivia smoothed a curl of hair from her forehead and whispered something so gentle it felt like a breeze crossing the room. I felt a strange heaviness settle in my chest, not unwelcome, but unfamiliar. This woman should not have been here. She should have been at home safe from the storm. She should have ignored the call. She should have questioned the message more. But she was here, kneeling beside my daughter, calming her through one of the worst nights of her young life. And the truth settled over me like the storm clouds starting to part outside the window. The wrong sitter had answered the wrong call. But she had given my daughter exactly what she needed, and I had no idea what that was supposed to mean for the days ahead. When I opened my eyes the next morning, the first thing I noticed was the silence. Not the heavy silence of fear that had filled the apartment the night before, but a softer one like the stillness of the air just before sunrise when the world has not yet decided what kind of day it will become. For a moment, I lay there staring at the ceiling, trying to remember how I made it from the living room to my bed. I must have drifted off on the couch and moved sometime after Harper stabilized. The storm had passed. Light pressed through the curtains in a pale, almost golden wash. It felt wrong. Mornings in my home had not started gently like this in a long time. I pushed myself out of bed and walked toward the hallway, half expecting the chaos of fever and restless breathing to still be waiting for me. Instead, I heard something that stopped me mid-step. Laughter. Small, light, genuine. Harper's laughter. The kind I used to hear when she was still a toddler before grief hollowed out the sound of it. I followed it to the kitchen and froze in the doorway. Olivia stood at the stove wearing one of my old sweaters, the sleeves rolled to her elbows. Her hair was still slightly damp from the night before and tied loosely behind her head. She flipped a pancake with a confident flick of her wrist, letting it land perfectly on the pan. Harper sat at the counter wrapped in her blanket cheeks, less flushed eyes bright. When she saw me, she lifted her hand but did not leave her place. "Daddy Liv is making pancakes shaped like stars." I blinked, stunned. Harper had given her a nickname. No child gives someone a nickname after a single night unless something in their heart recognizes comfort. Harper had not given anyone a nickname since her mother. I stepped fully into the room, and Olivia turned, offering me a quiet good morning that felt like it carried 2 meanings. I studied Harper's face carefully. Her breathing looked normal. Her color was improving. She leaned comfortably against the counter, hair messy from sleep, her blanket draped around her shoulders like a cape. She was better. She was truly better, and I had not been the one to get her here. That truth landed heavily in my chest. "Would you like one too?" Olivia asked, raising a spatula in my direction. "Pancake or star-shaped?" I managed a faint smile and said I would take whichever was less likely to burn. Harper laughed again, a quick, bright sound that made my pulse stutter. I had forgotten how that laugh felt echoing across the kitchen. Olivia placed a plate in front of me and then checked Harper's forehead with 2 fingers, a touch so natural and practiced it nearly hurt to watch. "No fever," she murmured. "I think she turned the corner." Harper leaned into her hand without hesitation. I sat down slowly, trying to process the surreal shift between the horror of last night and the warmth of this morning. I had lived 3 years in a house full of ghosts, in routines that felt like walking through fog. And yet here was a morning with sunlight and pancakes and laughter, and someone humming a soft tune under her breath while moving around my kitchen as if she had been part of it for years. When Harper finished her pancake, she asked if Liv could braid her hair. My breath hitched. Harper never let anyone touch her hair, not even the sitters she liked. Olivia knelt in front of her, gently separated the curls, and began weaving them into a simple braid. Harper smiled through the entire process. I watched, unable to look away. When I glanced toward the living room, I noticed something on the shelf. The baby monitor. The live feed showed Harper and Olivia from the night before. I had forgotten it was still recording. A part of me wanted to turn it off immediately, but something kept me rooted in place. I picked it up and scrolled back to the moment Harper had woken at 2 a.m. She had whimpered for her mother the way she sometimes did when delirious with fever. Then Olivia had shifted her onto her lap, held her gently, and whispered something that quieted her. I watched her rock Harper, not quickly, not mechanically, but with a slow, steady rhythm that matched Harper's breath. The camera caught the moment Harper wrapped her small fingers around Olivia's thumb and fell asleep again. My throat tightened painfully. For 3 years, I had tried everything to replace that sense of security. Therapists, specialists, nannies, parenting books. None of them had brought Harper this kind of peace. And here was a woman who had walked into my home by accident and given my daughter a night of comfort I had not been able to provide. I set the monitor down and took a breath to steady myself. When I stepped back into the kitchen, Olivia was helping Harper tie her shoes, humming the same tune she had carried through the air earlier. Harper stood up once the last knot was secured and wrapped her arms around Olivia's neck. "Thank you for helping me not be scared last night." Olivia pressed her cheek against Harper's hair as if she understood the weight of the gratitude. Any time she whispered, I cleared my throat to regain their attention and said it was time for breakfast cleanup. Harper hopped toward the table to grab her plate, and Olivia rose to put away the mixing bowl. For a moment, she stood very still, eyes drifting across the room like she was memorizing it. "Does this kitchen always feel this warm in the morning?" she asked. "No," I said. "Not for a long time." Something unspoken passed between us. A recognition, a strange familiarity, a fragile but undeniable shift. My morning had never felt like this since the day everything changed. And as I watched Olivia fold the dish towel and Harper skip across the room, with a lightness she had not shown in years, I knew that whatever this was, whatever had begun in the worst storm of our lives, was not going to disappear with the morning light. By late morning, the air outside had turned crisp and clear, washed clean by the storm that had hammered the city through the night. The streets shimmered with leftover rain, and thin pools of water caught the sunlight like scattered mirrors. I suggested a short walk around Lake Union to help Harper get some fresh air after her fever broke, expecting Olivia to politely decline or remind me she needed to leave soon. Instead, she simply nodded, slipped into her shoes, and helped Harper zip her jacket. The 3 of us stepped out of the building together, and for the first time in a long while, I did not feel like we were a fractured pair moving through the world with missing pieces. I had forgotten what it felt like to be more than a father carrying his child's fears on his shoulders. Harper held Olivia's hand the moment we reached the sidewalk. Her small fingers curled around Olivia's naturally, instinctively, with no hesitation at all. I should have been relieved to see her so calm, but a knot tightened in my chest as I watched them. There was a part of me that felt threatened by how quickly Harper trusted her, a part that whispered I was being replaced without anyone saying the words out loud. But then I saw Harper tilt her head back to talk to Olivia, her curls bouncing with every step, her voice quiet and eager as she described her favorite places around the lake. That sound had been missing in our house for so long that I forced myself to let the fear sit in silence and not speak for me. When we reached the path along the water, the breeze brushed Harper's cheeks and carried the scent of pine and lake water. Olivia slowed her pace so Harper could examine a line of ducks waddling toward the edge. Harper pointed at the smallest one and said she wanted to name it Willow. Olivia crouched beside her and asked why. Harper said because willow trees bend and never break when the wind gets strong. I blinked at my daughter, stunned by the depth of the metaphor she offered without even realizing the weight behind it. Olivia looked at me over her shoulder, and there was something quiet in her eyes. Admiration, understanding, maybe even recognition of the resilience Harper had been forced to learn too young. As we continued walking, I noticed how Olivia matched Harper's rhythm without trying to steer it. When Harper slowed, she slowed. When Harper sped up, Olivia laughed and gently hurried along. When Harper reached for my hand, Olivia stepped a little to the side so Harper stood safely between us. It felt strange, this silent choreography between three people who had not even known each other 24 hours earlier. Sometimes I caught Olivia glancing at Harper with a mix of tenderness and caution, as if she was letting herself feel something while still guarding the edges of it. At one point, Harper ran ahead to gather a handful of small, smooth stones. Her energy was already returning, her color brightening by the minute. When she paused a few steps ahead, Olivia spoke quietly enough that only I could hear. "She is remarkable." I nodded. "She is her mother's daughter." Olivia's expression softened. She asked how long it had been. I told her 3 years last month. Stroke. Sudden. No warning. I watched Olivia's shoulders drop slightly, as if absorbing the weight of the loss, instead of reacting to it with pity. She looked out at the water for a moment before saying she understood what sudden changes felt like, the kind that tear through your life before you know what is happening. Her tone carried more truth than the words revealed. The last time I had walked this path with someone besides Harper was before my wife died. I had not expected the memories to come back with such force, yet Olivia's presence somehow softened the edges. It was not that she reminded me of my wife. She did not. It was that she moved through the world with an awareness that steadied everything around her. When Harper jogged back to us clutching her stones, she handed one to Olivia. "This one is for you because it is smooth on both sides, and Mommy used to say smooth things mean good days." Olivia hesitated, then took the stone gently and closed her hand around it like it was far more precious than a small piece of lake rock. She thanked Harper and slipped it into her pocket. There was a flicker in her expression that hinted at a story she had not yet told. We reached a bench overlooking the water, and Harper settled between us, leaning her head against my arm. Olivia watched her for several seconds before speaking. "I said last night that something happened at the school. I told you the short version, but not the part that made me leave." I turned toward her, sensing something she had been holding back. She kept her eyes on the water as she continued. "The boy I worked with, Liam, had always been afraid of loud noises. One afternoon we were crossing the schoolyard when a pickup truck swerved too close to the curb and hit a pole. No one was seriously hurt, but the crash was violent. Metal against metal, screeching brakes." She paused and swallowed hard. Liam fell. I caught him before he hit the pavement, but the look on his face, it was like his world ruptured in front of him and I could not stop it. I told her no one could have predicted that. She nodded, but her gaze stayed far away. "The school let me take time off. The parents thanked me. Everyone said I protected him. But the truth is, I hesitated for half a second when the truck hit the pole. I froze. And for a long time, I believed that half-second meant I should not be responsible for any child." Harper's small voice suddenly broke through the heaviness. "Look, Daddy, the ducks are swimming." She pointed toward the lake, and I felt something shift in me, like the universe had offered a small reminder that life keeps moving forward, no matter how long we stand still. Olivia watched Harper with a tenderness that made it hard to breathe. "You did not freeze," I said quietly. "You reacted. You protected him. You did what anyone human would do in a moment like that." She turned to me, eyes searching mine as if weighing whether to believe me. Maybe, she whispered, but I lost my confidence. I lost my place in that world. And sometimes I wonder if moments like last night happen because I am meant to find my way back to it. The words lingered in the air, like a truth neither of us expected to say out loud. I felt something loosen in my chest, something I had not felt in years. Not attraction, not yet, but recognition, understanding. the beginnings of something that would become harder to ignore with each passing hour. Harper tugged at both our hands and asked if we could walk the long way home. Olivia smiled and said yes before I could answer. As we followed Harper along the winding path, I realized that somewhere between the storm and the sunlight, the grief and the quiet confessions, something inside me had begun to thaw. And the walk we took that morning was not just around the lake, it was a walk back into feeling. That night arrived quietly without the drama of thunder or the rush of emergency calls, yet it became one of the most defining nights of my life. The apartment felt warmer than usual when we returned from our walk, the kind of warmth that comes not from heating vents, but from being around someone who softens the edges of your day. Harper was energetic for most of the afternoon, playing with her blocks and showing Olivia every drawing she had ever made. But by early evening, faint signs of fatigue crept back into her posture. Her shoulders drooped, her voice grew softer. Her laughter faded into small smiles. By the time dinner ended, she was leaning against my arm as if gravity had become heavier for her than for the rest of us. Olivia noticed before I did. She knelt beside Harper, placed 2 fingers on her neck, and let her palm rest lightly over her chest. The concern in her eyes appeared gently like a tide returning. Her breathing is quicker than earlier. I do not like that, she said. The words pierced through my calm. I scooped Harper into my arms, feeling the rapid rise and fall against my chest. Fear climbed up my spine with a speed I had not felt since the night I lost my wife. Harper buried her face in my neck and whispered that her throat hurt. Olivia placed a hand gently over Harper's back. "Ethan, I think the fever is trying to come back. She needs to stay upright for a while." I sat on the couch with Harper curled against me, her body tense and warm. Olivia sat on the other side and watched closely as if she were timing every breath Harper took. Minutes passed. Each one felt heavier than the last. Harper's breathing grew uneven. She took shallow breaths, the small muscles in her ribs working harder than they had that morning. Panic washed through me. I had seen this before. Rapid breathing, the fear in her eyes. The splitting edge between controlled illness and something that could turn dangerous quickly. My heart pounded as I stood to grab the emergency inhaler the pediatrician had prescribed months ago. My hands shook as I searched the drawer. Olivia stepped beside me and quietly placed a hand on my arm. "Let me." She took the inhaler, tested it, then returned to Harper with a calm I envied. She coaxed Harper to sit upright and pressed the inhaler gently to her lips. Harper breathed in once, twice, 3 times, her eyes locked on Olivia's. "Good," Olivia whispered. "You are doing great." After several minutes, the slight wheezing eased. Harper's shoulders relaxed. The terror that had been building in my chest loosened its grip. I sank onto the edge of the coffee table, exhausted from the fear I had barely managed to contain. Olivia sat beside Harper, stroking her curls with slow, deliberate motions. Within minutes, Harper's body softened against the pillow. She drifted into sleep, her breathing steadier, her small hand curled around Olivia's fingers. I lowered my head into my hands. The adrenaline had worn off, and what remained was the crushing realization that I had almost panicked in front of her again. I felt useless, incapable, like a man still stumbling through fatherhood, even after 3 years of doing it alone. Olivia sat quietly for a long moment, watching Harper as if waiting for the right time to speak. When she turned toward me, her voice carried no judgment, only understanding. "She is all right now. You did everything right." I shook my head. "No." I froze. I always freeze. I could not save her mother. I could not calm Harper last night. And when she needed me tonight, I was too slow again. The words came out rough, stripped of pride. Olivia moved to sit on the floor beside me, close enough that I could sense the calm she carried even without her touching me. "You did not freeze. You responded. You got the inhaler. You soothed her. Ethan, she trusts you more than anyone." I laughed, but it was an empty sound. Trusting me and being safe with me are not the same thing. She looked at me in a way that made it hard to breathe. "You are carrying the weight of 2 people. No one can do that perfectly. Grief does not make you weak. It makes you human." Her words were steady, but her eyes held a depth I had not expected. She leaned back slightly and rested her palms on the rug. You think you failed Harper last night because you needed help, but let me tell you something I learned the hard way. Children do not need a perfect parent. They need a present one. I felt something in my chest crack open again the way it had the night before when I first watched her calm Harper. I tried to speak, but the words tangled. I swallowed, thickly blinking, fast. The room blurred around the edges. I had not cried in years. Not since the funeral. Not since the last night in the hospital when the machines went quiet. Now the memories came rushing back like cold water. I felt as though I had been running on numb autopilot for years, and here was someone reminding me that being alive required feeling not just surviving. Olivia did not move closer. She did not reach for me. She simply existed beside me in the quiet with the kind of presence that allowed the walls I had fortified for years to finally soften. When the tears came, I let them. Slow, silent, heavy. I covered my face with my hands and breathed through the hurt that had been dormant for too long. I felt embarrassed and exposed, but Olivia's voice broke the silence with a sweetness that steadied me. Ethan, you are not broken. You are tired, you are grieving, and you are trying harder than you think. We sat there for a long time, the only sound the soft hum of the heater and the gentle rhythm of Harper's breathing. When I finally spoke again, my voice was hoarse. How do you do that? She tilted her head. What? Walk into a stranger's home and carry all the weight in the room like it belongs to you. Olivia's smile flickered at the corner of her mouth. I do not carry it. I just refuse to let other people carry it alone. I looked at her. Truly looked, and something unspoken passed between us. A connection that had been forming quietly beneath the surface of every moment since she arrived. That night was supposed to be about saving Harper. But when I lay awake hours later, listening to the steady breathing of both the girl who was my world and the woman who had stepped into it by accident, I understood something I had not wanted to admit. Olivia had saved me too. The next few days unfolded with a softness I had not felt in years, a kind of gentleness that wrapped itself around the apartment, the way morning light wraps around the horizon before anyone notices. Harper continued to recover steadily, and Olivia remained with us longer than either of us had planned. At first, she stayed because Harper's fever had threatened to return then, because she wanted to monitor her breathing one more night. Then because Harper asked her to read a bedtime story, then because I could not bring myself to tell her she did not need to stay anymore. By the third day, my home no longer felt like the place where fear clung to the corners. Instead, it felt lived in. Light moved differently across the floors. The air seemed warmer. Even the silence which had once echoed with loss now seemed filled with a sense of presence, like someone humming softly just out of sight. Olivia slipped into our routines without forcing anything. She cooked breakfast while I made coffee. She helped Harper braid her hair while I found her backpack. When Harper grew tired in the afternoons, Olivia guided her to the couch and covered her with the knitted blanket my wife's mother had made before she passed. Watching her do these things, watching her move through the kitchen or fold laundry beside me or read Harper's favorite book in a soft, patient voice, felt both completely foreign and oddly natural. Like she was rediscovering something she had lost, and I was rediscovering something I thought I would never feel again. On the fourth morning, Harper insisted on helping Olivia crack eggs for breakfast. I walked into the kitchen just in time to see Harper break one with more enthusiasm than coordination, sending half the shell flying across the counter. Olivia laughed quietly without any frustration, simply brushing the shell aside and guiding Harper's hands through the next attempt. The sound of that laughter light and unguarded stirred something deep in me. I leaned against the doorway and watched them, noticing how comfortable Harper had become in her presence. It had taken nearly a year for Harper to speak more than a few words to the first sitter I hired after my wife died. Yet here she was, standing on a stool beside Olivia, chatting as if they had been connected by something deeper than chance. A fragile part of me feared what that connection meant. I had spent years guarding Harper from further emotional wounds. I had become the wall between her and anything that might hurt her again, even if that meant isolating both of us. Now I watched her lean into Olivia's shoulder when she grew sleepy, saw the way she smiled up at her with unreserved trust, and I felt both relief and panic. Relief that Harper finally felt safe again. panic that this safety depended on someone who by all logic should not have been in our lives. Around lunchtime, Harper curled on the couch with her favorite stuffed rabbit and drifted into a nap. Olivia and I moved into the kitchen with the ease of two people who had unknowingly fallen into a rhythm. She washed dishes while I dried them. At one point, her hand brushed mine as she passed a plate across the sink, and the smallest static shock zipped upward through my arm. She glanced at me, a quiet awareness passing between us, but neither of us said anything. The silence was comfortable, the kind that did not demand explanation. Later that afternoon, Harper woke up asking for hot chocolate. Olivia made it the same way my wife used to, stirring small circles into the cup until the cocoa melted perfectly into the milk. I did not tell her that. I simply watched the familiar gesture, feeling memories surface with a gentleness I had not believed possible anymore. That evening after dinner, Olivia said she could stay one more night if Harper needed. She said it with uncertainty, as if she did not want to impose. I told her Harper would sleep better if she stayed. It was the truth. The deeper truth was that the house felt different when she was in it, steadier, warmer, alive, in ways I had forgotten a home could be. She hesitated, looked as if she might decline, then nodded with a small, grateful smile. When Harper finally fell asleep that night, I lingered in the hallway watching Olivia quietly fold the blanket at the foot of the couch. Something in the stillness of that moment made my chest tighten. She fit here, not in the sense of a replacement, not as a shadow of the woman I had lost, but as someone whose presence softened grief without trying to erase it. I walked into the living room and sat down across from her. She lifted her gaze, reading the weight in my expression before I even spoke. "You did not have to stay this long," I said. She studied me for a moment, then brushed a curl of hair behind her ear. "I know, but Harper needed consistency. So did you." The honesty in her tone startled me. She was not wrong. I had been navigating fatherhood through adrenaline and fear for so long that I had forgotten what stability felt like. I had forgotten what it was like to rely on someone else without feeling guilty or afraid. Olivia looked around the room with a softness that made me wonder what she saw when she looked at our home. A place in transition, perhaps. A place where grief still lived in the corners, but hope had begun to push its way in. She turned back to me, and her voice dropped just above a whisper. "You have been doing this alone for a long time. Too long." I inhaled slowly, letting the truth of her words settle. I was not sure if she realized how deeply they reached. She had not just stepped into my home. She had stepped into spaces I had kept locked for years, places too raw to share with anyone. And somehow, she had done it without forcing the door open. In the quiet that followed, Harper stirred slightly in her sleep, and Olivia's eyes softened even more. There was something in that expression that made my pulse stumble, something unspoken but unmistakable. A shift, a beginning, a small edge of tenderness that neither of us dared name out loud. I realized in that moment that she had become the quiet part of our home, the space between the noise, the warmth in the silence, the steadying presence after years of instability. And even though I knew that letting her become that mattered more than I wanted to admit, I also knew a truth that filled me with both dread and longing. If she ever walked away, the house would feel empty in a way it had not felt empty before. The evening of the 6th day settled over the city with a quiet golden haze, the kind that made the lake shimmer like a sheet of glass and softened every sound into a gentle echo. Harper had been full of energy for most of the day, laughing easily, running from room to room with renewed strength. But as dusk approached, a familiar tiredness pulled at her small frame. Olivia noticed it before I did, as she always seemed to. She suggested we take Harper out to the boathouse near the dock behind our building, a place where the water caught the last light of the day in long ribbons of orange and pink. I agreed, thinking the fresh air would help Harper wind down before bedtime. The boathouse sat only a few feet above the water, its wooden boards still damp from the storm. We settled on the edge legs dangling above the lake, the soft creak of the boards beneath us blending with the distant sound of a passing ferry. Harper slid into Olivia's lap without hesitation, curling into her as if the world made more sense from that vantage point. I sat beside them close enough to feel the warmth radiating from their bodies, but far enough that I could watch them both clearly. Harper rested her head against Olivia's chest, her breathing slow and steady, the light brushing her curls with a gentle glow. Olivia wrapped an arm around her, swaying slightly in a soothing rhythm. She looked like she had been born for moments like this. Moments where her presence alone seemed to anchor everything around her. Harper's eyelids drooped as she watched the ripples in the water. She was quiet for so long that I thought she might fall asleep right there. But then she lifted her head and looked up at Olivia with an expression I had not seen in a long time. An expression filled with a kind of hesitant longing that made my chest tighten. "Liv," she whispered almost too softly for the wind to carry the words. "Can I ask you something?" Olivia brushed a curl from Harper's forehead. "Of course. Anything." Harper hesitated, picking at the edge of the blanket draped over them. Her lower lip pressed into a small, trembling line, the way it always did when she was thinking about her mother. When she finally spoke, the world around us seemed to still. "Liv, can you be my new mommy?" The question fell between us like a stone dropped into still water. My breath caught. Olivia's entire body went still. Harper stared up at her with wide, hopeful eyes, completely unaware of the weight of what she had just asked. My heart clenched so hard I had to look away for a moment. I had feared this. Feared it more than anything. Feared that Harper would attach herself so deeply to Olivia that losing her would feel like losing her mother all over again. Feared that I had allowed someone into our home too easily, that I had let the warmth distract me from the fragility of Harper's heart. When I looked back at Olivia, I saw a flicker of emotion cross her face. Not fear, not discomfort, something gentler, something sad, something that told me she understood the gravity of what Harper had asked. She did not answer right away. She gathered Harper closer, pressing a soft kiss to the top of her head. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was warm and steady, but laced with a tenderness that made my throat tighten. "Sweetheart, that is a very big question." Harper blinked, her brows drawing together. Olivia continued, choosing her words carefully. "I love spending time with you, and I care about you so much already, but questions like that, they take time. They take growing and learning and being together for a while. Does that make sense?" Harper thought for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Will you stay with us for a long while?" Another silence. Another wound opening quietly in the center of my chest. Olivia hesitated, then answered in the only way a responsible adult should. "I will stay as long as I can, as long as it is right, and as long as it makes you feel safe." Harper reached up and touched Olivia's cheek with a small hand. "You make me feel safe." I felt something in me shatter, something deep and fragile, something I had spent years trying to protect. Olivia closed her eyes for a brief moment, as if steadying herself, then kissed Harper's forehead again. "I am glad," she whispered. "Truly glad." Harper relaxed against her again, exhausted by her own question, her body growing heavy with sleep. In minutes, she was breathing softly, the rise and fall of her small chest pressing gently against Olivia's arm. I stared at the lake, unable to speak, unable to breathe normally. The sky darkened into shades of violet and navy. The water mirrored it back. The moment felt suspended in time. When Olivia finally lifted her gaze to mine, it was filled with something I could not fully decipher. An apology, a question, a warning, a confession, all of them tangled together. "Ethan," she said softly, her voice barely above the sound of water brushing the posts beneath us. "She is just a little girl. She is trying to make sense of her feelings the only way she knows how." "I know," I answered, but my voice did not sound like mine. It was rough, strained, pressed thin by the fear spreading in my chest. Olivia looked down at Harper, her expression full of tenderness and ache. "I would never hurt her. I hope you know that." "I do," I said quickly, and I meant it, but knowing that did not soften the impact of what had happened. The question hung in the air between us, echoing in my mind again and again. "Will you be my new mommy?" The three words that had the power to heal or destroy. The three words that carried my biggest fear and Harper's deepest hope. The walk back to the apartment was quiet. Harper slept in my arms while Olivia walked beside us, her steps slow, her face unreadable. When we reached the living room, I carried Harper to her room and tucked her into bed. She murmured Liv's name once before sinking fully into sleep. When I returned to the hallway, Olivia stood near the window, arms folded, staring out at the city lights. She turned toward me slowly, her expression searching mine. I did not know what to say. I did not know how to bridge the impossible moment that had unfolded on the boathouse. She whispered my name, Ethan, but whatever she meant to say after that never left her lips. Because the truth came crashing into me all at once, overwhelming and sharp. If she ever left now, if she walked away from us, Harper would break, and I had no idea how to stop that from happening. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Harper curled against Olivia on the boathouse, her small voice echoing in my head with the force of a truth I had spent years trying to avoid. Will you be my new mommy? The question folded itself into the darkness like a blade, and every time I shifted in bed, it cut a little deeper. By morning, I felt hollowed out raw in a way I had not felt since the hospital, since the night I held my wife's hand and promised her I would take care of our daughter. I had kept that promise, but in the shadows of my own fear. I knew how to protect Harper. I knew how to give her routine stability shelter, but letting her love anyone new meant opening her heart to the possibility of loss again, and that thought terrified me more than anything I had faced as a CEO, a husband, or a father. When I walked into the kitchen, Olivia was already there. She looked tired, too pale from lack of sleep, but still moving with the same quiet steadiness that had become her signature presence in our home. Harper was sitting at the counter, eating toast, swinging her legs without a care in the world. Her smile when she saw Olivia was unfiltered joy. For a moment, I stood in the doorway watching them, and a wave of panic rose so quickly in me that I had to grip the doorframe to steady myself. Olivia turned then and offered me a small good morning. The sight of her standing in my kitchen, comfortable, familiar, woven into our routines in ways I had not expected, filled me with a sudden irrational fear. It was too much, too fast, too close to something I had not allowed myself to feel since the day I lost everything. I responded with a quiet morning, but my voice lacked warmth. She noticed. Of course she noticed. Olivia saw everything. The air between us shifted subtly. Harper asked if we could all go to the park after breakfast, her voice bright with hope. I hesitated, thinking of excuses, but Olivia smiled gently at her and said we would see how things went. The conversation moved on, but something fragile cracked in the space between Olivia and me. After breakfast, Harper gathered her crayons in the living room while Olivia and I cleaned up. She handed me a plate still damp with soap, and for the first time since she arrived, my instinct was to pull my hand away before our fingers touched. She paused, watching me, her eyes narrowing ever so slightly. Something wrong? The question was simple, but it echoed louder than she intended. No. Everything is fine. The lie hung in the air like thick fog. She dried her hands, slowly studying me with the same careful gaze she used when assessing Harper's breathing. Ethan talked to me. You barely looked at me this morning. You barely slept. What is going on? I opened my mouth to answer, but the truth snarled in my throat, tangled in old grief, old panic, old wounds that had never healed. I could not tell her the real reason. I could not admit I was terrified of losing her before I had even allowed myself to fully accept her presence. I stepped back. I just need space. The moment the words left my mouth, I saw something flicker in her expression. Not hurt, not yet. Something closer to recognition. Fear, maybe. A fear that mirrored my own. But instead of stepping closer, instead of asking again, she nodded once quietly. All right, if that is what you need. The distance I created widened through the rest of the day. Every time Olivia reached to help Harper with something, I felt a rush of defensiveness I could not explain. Every time Harper laughed with her, the knot in my chest pulled tighter. I stayed busy. I reorganized the pantry. I checked emails I had no intention of responding to. I cleaned the same spot on the counter 3 times, just to avoid looking at the two of them together. Olivia did not confront me again, but I felt her confusion growing with each passing hour. That evening, after Harper finished a puzzle, she asked if Olivia would tuck her into bed. My heart clenched. Olivia glanced toward me, waiting for permission. Something irrational in me wanted to say no, wanted to pull Harper into my arms and shut the world out the way I had done for years. But Harper was looking up with so much hope that saying no felt cruel. So I nodded stiffly. Olivia led Harper to her room, reading to her in a quiet, steady voice until she fell asleep. I stood outside the cracked door, listening to every word, every breath, every soft sound. When Olivia stepped out, she found me standing there. Her eyes were soft but heavy with unspoken questions. I cleared my throat, searching for something neutral to say. Thanks for helping her. Olivia folded her arms across her chest as if bracing herself. Ethan, what are you afraid of? Her voice was gentle, but the words pierced through every layer of protection I had left. I stepped back, shaking my head. I am not afraid. I just think this is moving too fast. She studied me for a moment, her expression tightening. Ethan, she said quietly, you are not afraid this is too fast. You are afraid this is real. The silence that followed felt like a deep wound ripping open. My breath caught, my jaw clenched. She had spoken the truth I was trying to outrun. She took one small step closer, her voice trembling slightly. I care about her, Ethan, and I care about you. But if you are going to shut me out every time something feels too close, too vulnerable, then you are not protecting her. You are just protecting your fear. The words hit harder than she knew, or maybe she knew exactly how hard they needed to hit. I felt every instinct in my body scream for distance, for control, for escape. I cannot do this, I said quietly. Her inhale was sharp, barely audible. Her eyes glistened, but she did not cry. She simply nodded. Then I should go. She walked past me slowly, quietly, as though not to wake Harper. When she reached the door, she rested her hand on the frame for a moment, steadying herself. She turned back, her voice soft, full of something painfully sincere. I did not walk into your life to hurt you, Ethan, but I cannot stay where I am not allowed to be seen. Then she left. The apartment door clicked closed, a sound so small, yet it broke something inside me with the force of a storm. Behind me, Harper stirred in her sleep and whispered Liv's name, and that was when the truth hit me with devastating clarity. I had not pushed Olivia away to protect Harper. I had pushed her away because I was terrified of loving her, and terrified of being loved in return. The apartment felt different the next morning, as if the air itself had thinned overnight. It was quieter, heavier, carrying an absence so sharp it might as well have been a physical object. I woke early, long before Harper stirred, and for a moment I forgot what had happened. Habit made me look toward the couch, expecting to see Olivia's blanket folded neatly at the edge. Her cup rinsed and placed beside the sink, the faint smell of her peppermint tea in the air. Instead, there was nothing. An emptiness that pressed against my ribs. I tried to steady myself, reminding my chest to rise and fall, reminding my legs to move, reminding my hands to do something, anything, so they would not shake the way they wanted to. By the time Harper woke up, rubbing her eyes and dragging her rabbit by its ear, I had already made her breakfast. Toast, eggs, berries, the same meal Olivia had made nearly every morning that week. Harper climbed onto her chair and looked at the table. Where is Liv? The question came so simply, so naturally, as if Olivia were as permanent in our home as the refrigerator or the window frames. I swallowed hard, forcing myself not to wince. Liv had to go home last night, sweetheart. She will not be here this morning. Harper blinked. Once, twice. Her confusion deepened. But she always comes back in the morning. The truth hit like a punch. She was not wrong. Olivia had always shown up, even when she did not have to, even when she had given every logical reason not to. Harper's lower lip trembled. Did I make her sad? I knelt in front of her, forcing my voice to stay steady. No, honey, you did nothing wrong, nothing at all. But the doubt had already burrowed into her expression. She pushed her plate away and lowered her head onto her arms, refusing to eat. For the first time since her mother died, Harper skipped breakfast. That was the first sign. The second came later that day when her laughter disappeared. She did not want to play with her blocks. She did not want to color. She did not want to watch cartoons or listen to her favorite story. Every time I tried to cheer her up, she only asked the same question. When is Liv coming back? I tried everything. Logic, distraction, patience, but nothing soothed the ache that had lodged in her chest. Harper sat by the window for most of the afternoon, staring at the parking lot as if waiting for a familiar figure to appear, with a soft smile and a worn backpack. When bedtime came, she refused to sleep in her room. She dragged her blanket to the couch and curled up where Olivia used to sit, clutching the corner of the fabric with desperate fingers. I sat beside her feeling helpless in a way I had not experienced since the day I realized my wife would not survive, and all the while I heard Olivia's last words echo in my mind. I cannot stay where I am not allowed to be seen. The next day, Harper woke up with dark smudges under her eyes. She barely spoke during breakfast. When I suggested going to the park, she shook her head. When I offered to bake cookies, she pushed the bowl away. When I picked her up to hug her, she leaned her forehead against my shoulder and whispered, "Daddy Liv left because of me. It destroyed me. Completely." I pulled her closer, pressing my lips to her hair. "No, sweetheart. No." But the words did not matter. She did not believe them. She cried into my shirt until her small body shook. I held her, feeling her pain seep into me, mixing with my own, until I could not distinguish between them. That night, she did not ask for a bedtime story. She simply curled against me and whispered Liv's name before falling asleep. On the third day, she refused to talk at all. Silence replaced her questions. Silence replaced her giggles. Silence replaced the small, bright pieces of her personality that Olivia had brought back to life. I watched her withdraw piece by piece as if every joyful memory from the week before had been erased. I recognized the signs. I had seen them after my wife's funeral. Children grieve differently. They go quiet first. They fold inward. They lose their sparkle. And Harper was losing hers again. Because of me. Because I had driven away the one person who had made her feel safe. By the fourth day, I could not bear it anymore. Harper sat on the living room floor, holding the stone she had given Olivia at the lake, rubbing its smooth surface the way she used to rub her mother's scarf for comfort. "Daddy, can we call Liv now?" Her voice cracked on the last word. I froze. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to dial Olivia's number instantly, but what would I even say? Come back even though I pushed you away out of fear. Help us again even though you should not have to fix what I broke. I had no right to ask her to return, but Harper needed her, desperately. Maybe more than she needed me in that moment, and that thought nearly brought me to my knees. That evening, after Harper fell asleep on the couch again, I stood at the window staring out at the city lights. The skyline blurred through my exhaustion. My pulse throbbed in my jaw. My thoughts collided like crashing waves. I imagined Harper growing older, remembering the week Olivia vanished as the week her hope did too. I imagined the regret that would follow me for years, the crushing guilt of knowing that I had let my daughter suffer because I had been too afraid to face my own heart. Something snapped inside me then. A shift. A clarity I had fought against for far too long. I grabbed my keys. I grabbed my jacket. And I did something I should have done days earlier. I went looking for Olivia. I checked the community center. A volunteer said she had stopped by earlier in the week but had not returned. I checked the elementary school. The front office told me she had not worked there since her leave. I drove to her old apartment building, but her name was no longer on the directory. Finally, on the 5th day, after nearly giving up, I saw her through the glass doors of the local library. She was sitting on a colorful carpet surrounded by children reading aloud with a soft, animated expression that made every kid lean closer. Olivia. Even from a distance, the sound of her voice steadied me. When she lifted her head and saw me standing there, her expression shifted instantly. Surprise, pain, hesitation, something unspoken pressing behind her eyes. I opened the door and stepped inside, heart pounding so hard it felt like it would crack my ribs. I had found her, but I had no idea if she would ever come back. When Olivia saw me standing at the entrance of that little library, the expression on her face nearly stopped me from taking another step. It was not anger exactly, but something more complex, something that told me she had built walls in the days since she walked out of my home. I could not blame her. I was the one who pushed her away. I stood there for a moment, unable to speak, watching her close the book she had been reading to a circle of kids who had clearly fallen under her spell. They scattered with happy chatter as another staff member stepped in to finish the session. Olivia remained kneeling on the soft carpet, gathering picture books into a stack. Her movements slow, deliberate, almost cautious. When she finally rose to her feet, she did not walk toward me quickly or slowly. She simply approached with the quiet steadiness that had always defined her. Ethan. My name in her voice cut through every fear I had carried all week. I swallowed hard, unsure where to begin. I thought of 100 apologies, but none seemed big enough to cover what I had broken. Olivia, I said softly, and her eyes flickered at the sound of her name. She crossed her arms, not defensive, but bracing herself for whatever I might say. I did not come here to make excuses. I could see her breathing shift almost imperceptibly, as if she had expected just that. I came because I made the biggest mistake since losing my wife. I stopped talking for a moment, the weight of my confession sitting heavy in my chest. I pushed you away because I thought that was the safest thing for my daughter. But the truth is, I pushed you away because I was terrified. I had not planned on saying it like that, but the words tumbled out with a force I could not control. Terrified of what she asked softly. Her voice did not carry judgment, only something like quiet heartbreak. Of feeling anything again. Of risking anything again. Of letting Harper love you. Of letting myself love you. Her breath caught a barely audible sound that made something in me break open. Olivia, I said, and for the first time my voice cracked. I have spent 2 years convincing myself that walls keep us safe, but this past week taught me walls only create different kinds of wounds. She looked away briefly as if holding back a surge of emotion, then met my gaze with an honesty that felt like being seen entirely. Ethan, I never wanted to be another source of pain for you or Harper. You were never pain, I said quickly. You were the only thing holding us together. Harper has not smiled since you left. She has barely slept. She thought you left because of her. That made Olivia flinch the way a parent flinches when hearing a child cry. Her hand rose instinctively to her chest. She said that. She carries the note you left everywhere. I said, barely breathing the words. She reads it before bedtime as if it is the last piece of hope she has. Something in Olivia's posture softened. Tears gathered at the corner of her eyes, but she blinked them back. I stepped closer until only a few feet separated us. I am sorry, Olivia. I am so damn sorry. I did not push you away because of anything you did. I pushed you away because you made me feel again, and I panicked. The silence between us thickened, but not with anger. It was the silence of two people standing at the edge of something fragile and unspoken. Olivia finally exhaled slowly. I was afraid too, she whispered. Afraid that stepping into your life would make me forget who I was before. Afraid of loving a child again after what happened at the school. Afraid of letting my heart open only to lose everything again. I nodded, my chest tightening. I understand. More than you know. She looked at me fully, then, no walls, no masks. And for a moment, it felt like the storm that had begun the night we met had finally stilled. Ethan, she said softly, I never wanted to walk away from you, or from Harper. But I needed to know that if I stayed, I would not be stepping into a place where fear controlled everything. Her words hit with the clarity of truth. I moved closer and gently took her hand, surprised when she let me. I cannot promise I will never be afraid, I said. But I can promise I will not run from that fear anymore. I can promise I will not shut you out. And I can promise that Harper and I want you in our lives, not out of desperation, but out of love. Her breath trembled. Ethan, that word is not small to me. Or, to me. She stared at our joined hands for a moment, then looked up with a softness I had not seen since before everything fell apart. I missed you, she whispered. Those 3 words nearly undid me. I missed you too, I said, more than I knew was possible. And then, as if drawn by something inevitable, she stepped closer until her forehead rested gently against my chest. I closed my eyes and wrapped my arms around her, holding her the way someone holds a truth too long denied. No kiss, no dramatic gesture. Just two people finding each other in the quiet aftermath of their mistakes. A small voice suddenly called from behind us. "Liv!" Olivia pulled back quickly and turned. Harper stood by the library door, holding her stuffed rabbit eyes wide, her lower lip trembling with hope. "Daddy said we could find you." Olivia knelt instantly, opening her arms. Harper ran into them with such force that Olivia nearly lost her balance. "I missed you," Harper whispered into her shoulder. Olivia's voice broke as she whispered back, "I missed you too." I looked at them and felt something shift inside me, something that had been locked away since the day my wife died. Olivia lifted her face, still holding Harper close, and looked at me. "So, where do we go from here?" I walked toward them and placed a hand gently on both of them together. "We start again," I said slowly. Not fast, not blind, not out of fear, but out of something real. Harper nodded against Olivia's shoulder, and Olivia exhaled with a shaky smile. For the first time in years, I felt like the world was not something I was surviving. It was something I was relearning how to live in. And Olivia Reed was the one teaching me. Olivia did not move back into our home right away, and that was something I respected more than I expected to. A younger version of me would have rushed everything the moment she said she missed me, but now I understood the difference between wanting something fast and wanting something that lasts. So we took our time. The first morning after the library, I invited her to walk Harper to preschool with us, and she said yes with a quiet smile. Harper held her hand the entire way, swinging it gently, humming to herself, the spark in her eyes returning. After we dropped her off, Olivia and I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, neither of us quite ready to leave. Seattle morning light glowed against the buildings, crisp and gentle. Olivia tucked a piece of hair behind her ear, and I found myself watching the small movement with something like awe. "Are we okay now?" she asked softly. "We are learning to be," I answered, and she nodded as if that was exactly the answer she hoped for. Over the next months, she became a constant presence in our lives without becoming a habit forced by fear. Some evenings, she stayed for dinner. Some mornings, she arrived early with tiny handwritten notes for Harper. On Fridays, she would join us at Pike Place Market, and Harper would insist on picking the biggest sunflowers to bring home because they reminded her of Olivia. On Pancake Saturdays, laughter filled the kitchen once again, and the scent of cinnamon drifted through the air the way it used to when Olivia first arrived in our lives, like a storm that had accidentally brought warmth. Harper flourished. She slept through the night again. She told jokes. She drew pictures of our little trio standing under a cartoon sun that always had a huge smiling face. Sometimes she called Olivia Liv. Sometimes she called her teacher. Once in a while, she slipped and said Mommy, but Olivia never corrected her. Instead, she would hold Harper a little tighter, her eyes soft with a love she did not try to hide. Meanwhile, Olivia found her own path again. She applied for a part-time position at a local preschool one with small class sizes and supportive staff, and when she told me she had been hired, her voice shook with excitement and fear. I hugged her tight, telling her that no matter what happened in that classroom, she was not doing any of it alone. A few weeks into her new job, she came over after work, her cheeks flushed from the cold, holding a stack of papers covered in glitter stickers. "My kids made these," she said, laughing as glitter sprinkled onto my shoes. I watched her talk about each child, her eyes alive in a way I had not seen for years, and I realized she was healing too. One evening, while Harper slept, I found Olivia sitting on the couch looking at a drawing Harper made earlier that day. In it, Olivia wore a blue dress, and Harper had drawn a heart floating above them both. Olivia traced the little heart with her thumb. "I never thought I would feel whole again," she whispered. I sat beside her without speaking, letting silence hold us. Eventually, she leaned her head against my shoulder. "I am not afraid anymore," she said. "Neither am I." And for the first time, I meant it completely. Spring arrived with soft breezes and warm mornings. On Harper's good days, we walked along the waterfront, watching ferries move like slow giants across the Sound. On her curious days, we visited bookstores and read aloud together, choosing new stories for bedtime. On her quiet days, Olivia would braid her hair, humming softly, while Harper leaned into her with the kind of trust children do not give lightly. It was during one of those quiet evenings that I realized something. We already were a family, not by blood, not by marriage, not by any official title, but by choice, by everyday moments, by showing up again and again, even when fear whispered otherwise. Still, there was one more step I needed to take, a step I had avoided for a year. One Saturday morning, I asked Olivia if she would come with me somewhere. She hesitated, understandably uneasy after the way things had unraveled before, but she said yes. We drove up to Cary Park, the same place I used to take Harper after her mother died when I needed fresh air but could not bear going anywhere crowded. The view of Seattle spread beneath us, the skyline glowing under a soft golden sun. Olivia hugged her jacket closer as I reached into my pocket, but her expression softened when she saw the small velvet box in my hand. Her breath caught. "Ethan," she whispered. I stepped closer, my voice steady in a way it had never been before. "We started because of a mistake I said, but every moment after that was a choice. You chose to stay when you did not have to. You chose to care when you were afraid. You chose to love a little girl who needed you more than you will ever understand." I opened the box, revealing a simple ring, elegant and warm. "I am not asking for forever today. I am asking for the life we already live. Will you choose it with me?" Olivia's eyes filled instantly, not with fear, but with something bright and certain. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, as if she wanted the city to hear it. "Yes." I slipped the ring onto her trembling hand, and she pulled me into an embrace that felt like a promise we had both waited years to make. Our wedding came months later, small, simple, held in the backyard of the home that had once felt too big and too empty. White string lights crossed above us, sunflowers lined the fence, and a tiny archway stood decorated with ribbons. Harper insisted on choosing herself. When Olivia walked toward me in a soft ivory dress, Harper held her hand, beaming with a pride that made my throat tighten. The officiant spoke, but honestly, I barely heard anything except the sound of Olivia's breath as she stood before me, her fingers slipping into mine. When he finally said, "I now pronounce you husband and wife," Harper shouted, "You can kiss her," and laughter rippled through every person present. Our first kiss as a married couple was soft and certain, and Harper threw petals into the air as if she had been waiting her whole life for this moment. The reception afterward was messy and loud and perfect. Cupcakes with too much frosting, music that was slightly off-key, children chasing each other under the lights, Olivia leaning against me, her head on my shoulder, whispering, "I cannot believe this is real." But it was real, all of it. And it only became more real as the months passed. Later, the shop window of Olivia's new children's reading center glowed warm against the evening light. Inside, Harper helped arrange books on low shelves while Olivia guided a group of little ones through a story. I watched through the window for a moment, feeling a peace I had not felt since before my life shattered. When I stepped inside, Harper ran to me laughing, and Olivia looked up with that same quiet light that had filled her eyes from the start. In that moment, everything made sense. The storm, the wrong number, the fear, the healing. Every misstep had led us here. A family not built by perfect beginnings, but by choosing each other every day. And as I wrapped my arms around my wife and my daughter in that warm, sunlit room, I realized something simple and profound. Love had not returned to me by accident. It had come home. There are stories we hear and then forget, and there are stories that stay with us long after the screen goes dark because somewhere inside them we recognize a piece of our own heart. If you stayed to the end of this journey with Ethan, Harper, and Olivia, then maybe you felt something shift inside you too, the way it shifted in them. Maybe you remember what it is like to lose someone you thought you could not live without, or what it feels like to build walls so high that not even hope could climb in. Maybe you know the heaviness of waking up in a house that feels too quiet, or the way fear can disguise itself as strength, convincing you that shutting people out is safer than letting love back in. This story was never just about a single dad or a child who stopped smiling, or a woman who arrived in the wrong storm on the wrong night. It is about healing the kind that does not happen in grand gestures, but in small moments. the warm hand resting on a child's back, the soft voice reading a bedtime story, the courage to say, "I am afraid," and still take another step forward. If you have ever felt broken or tired or unsure of how to begin again, then you know the truth behind this story. Healing does not come all at once. It comes in the quiet mornings when someone shows up for you. It comes in the soft echoes of laughter you thought you would never hear again. It comes when you choose to believe that your heart still has room left for love even after everything you lost. Maybe you saw yourself in Ethan fighting through fear, pretending strength is the same as numbness. Maybe you felt a little of Olivia's guilt, carrying the weight of mistakes that were never really hers. Or maybe you saw your younger self in Harper, that small, brave part of you still hoping someone will stay long enough for you to trust again. And if this story touched something in you, even if only for a moment, then I want to tell you this: you are not alone. Your grief, your hope, your fear, your longing, all of it has a place here. Every week we share stories like this, not because life is perfect, but because life is messy and beautiful and full of second chances you do not always see coming. Stories that remind us that families are not only born, they are chosen. Stories that whisper that even in the darkest nights, there is someone walking toward you, not away from you. Stories that say love can return, even if it shows up in the rain, drenched and unexpected. If you felt your chest tighten or your eyes soften, or if something inside you said keep going, then this is your place. Stay with us. Let us bring you more moments like this, more journeys that stir your heart and remind you that no matter your age, no matter what you have lost, no matter how long you have been standing in the quiet, there is still warmth waiting for you. All you have to do is stay for the next story. And if you want to keep feeling this way, if you want to belong to a community that breathes the same softness and resilience you felt here then, hit subscribe and let your heart find its way home again, one story at a time. Because sometimes you do not choose the story. Sometimes the story chooses you.